The professional's leading lady is in fact the unusual little girl named Matilda. Born into a cruel world of crime and drugs, Matilda had to grow up way before her time. Though Matilda would endure as one of the most memorable young characters in cinema, this precocious would-be killer is not exactly the kind of role most child actors or their protective parents would aspire to. But Natalie Portman was not like most children.
I was 11 years old when I first read the script, and I remember reading it. I was sitting in my dad's study. I was sitting in his chair, and I read it, and I was like crying by the end. I was very emotional, sort of little kid, and my parents were like, "There is no way you're doing this movie. This is absolutely inappropriate for a child your age to be doing this film." And I was like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever read. You're gonna ruin my life," and was basically just fighting with them so much.
After her parents relented, Natalie auditioned for the role.
What's your name?
Matilda. What about you?
Léon.
Cute name, Léon.
I'm sorry about your father.
Anyway, somebody didn't do it someday or another. I would have probably done it myself.
Your mother, was she there?
She's not my mother. I mean, it wasn't my real mother. My sister, she wanted to lose weight anyway. I bet she never looked so good. Wasn't even my sister, really. Just a half-sister. Not a good half at that.
I didn't really have any professional experience before I made the film.
Hi, Matilda.
Hi, Piggy.
How you doing?
I've seen better days, but I've seen worse also.
Have you ever seen a real pig?
No.
How about a cow?
No.
Have you seen any animals?
Dogs. All my life. What are you doing with a gun like that in your house?
It's mine.
Well, I didn't think it was the old bats down the hall. Jesus Christmas!
Can you sit over here, please?
Are they real?
What good are fake ones?
And what did you say you did again?
After a callback, Natalie got the offer to play Matilda, but her parents first made the director accept their conditions.
And so they sort of had these negotiations with Luke about what could be left in, what could be taken out, you know, all of that. One of the things my parents were particularly concerned about was the smoking in the movie. They had a very detailed agreement with Luke about what could be used. I was only allowed to have 5 cigarettes in my hand in the entire shooting of the film. I wasn't allowed to inhale. They weren't allowed to be real cigarettes, which you can actually see in the movie. You see me like putting them to my lips, but you never see me like blowing out, or you just see me like holding a cigarette. And then the other thing was that she has to quit during the movie, which is also in there. You see her, you know, you see Léon scold Matilda for smoking, and then later on in the film when she's alone, she just throws a cigarette away when she's alone. Those were the rules. The sexual undertones or overtones of the film were also things that my parents tried to scale down. In the original script, there was a scene where Matilda was in the shower and Léon sort of walked in by accident and he, you know, gave her a towel and she was like, "I don't care," or whatever. And so that was clearly axed.
When production started in New York City, Natalie met her co-star, Jean Reno.
It was really important for me because I, of course, had never experienced anyone doing character work. I hadn't been around actors before. He was so kind when we were like working together.
Natalie's talent was first put to the test in the scene in which Matilda sees that her family has been killed.
I do remember filming that scene. I was in the Chelsea Hotel, which is sort of a famed hotel in New York. You know, it was the early weeks of shooting that it was really, really hard for me to cry there. And so that was the first time I ever had menthol blown in my eyes. And they did it once, and then I was like, okay, I can cry. It was so painful that every take after that, I was able to, you know, get serious focus and just cry because I didn't want any more mint in my eye. You don't really have that much stress when you've never had this experience before, because I think people get nervous about not being able to cry when they've had the experience in the past of not being able to cry or on cue or whatever, or, you know, giving it all up in rehearsal and then not being able to get it when you shoot. And I had never had that experience before.
Natalie says that her family history had given her an early awareness of what can take place in the world.
I've grown up with, you know, stories. My grandparents escaped the Holocaust, and so you have these sort of family things that are really dark and really heavy that are part of your sort of like family collective unconscious that I think help in those sort of situations. It wasn't like I was blind to like the horrors of the world. It was just that I hadn't personally experienced them.
In her scene with Gary Oldman, young Natalie discovered that all she had to do was watch his performance.
Working with Gary Oldman was probably the easiest acting experience of my life, because I don't even remember being directed at all. I just sat there and watched him and was terrified, and I don't think I had to act at all in that scene. I mean, it was really really simple, because he really does what he does well. I mean, he really can do it. It was pretty amazing to get to see that close, but it was also sort of a gift to me.
To determine which stars Natalie would impersonate in her big charade game with Renault, the director decided to let her take the lead.
The charades were all things that, in my audition, Luke said, what impersonations can you do? And those were the three I did there in my audition. And Madonna, obviously, like, that I grew up with Madonna. And Charlie Chaplin was, I don't know, I probably had seen, like, movies at home or something. And then the Marilyn one, I got from Mike Myers doing an impersonation of her in, like, Wayne's World or something. I have this vague memory of, like, copying, you know, someone else's impersonation for that. It wasn't, I had never seen the original Marilyn tapes at all. And then the Gene Kelly one was something that they asked me to do because, you know, Luke had written it in that Leon's a big Gene Kelly fan. And luckily I was, you know, taking tap classes then, so I was doing my little, you know, tap dance.
Natalie remembers the controversial scene that was cut from the film's US release, and how at the time she understood Matilda's feelings about love and sex.
I think that when you're 11 and you're reading I love you, I mean, there's not too many ways to interpret that. There's not, I mean, I personally didn't have a real, you know, sexual understanding at that point at all. So the I love you was very, very innocent. And obviously Matilda's a girl who comes from a place where, I mean, you see her see sex in the beginning of the film, so it's not something she's unfamiliar with, or, you know, she's not a stranger to sexuality and clearly has these sort of instincts within her. But it's a very, I mean, it's a very pure sort of thing in the film. You know, it doesn't cross that line. It's just these two people who are so alone and happen to find each other within this sort of graveyard.
When the time came for Natalie to handle a gun, her parents made sure she knew what she was doing.
We were shooting right after the Crow accident happened, and Brandon Lee got shot with what was supposed to be an unloaded weapon on a film set. And so obviously my parents were so neurotic about this stuff, and they had a firearms like expert showing me everything. I mean, I actually learned how to like assemble the gun myself and check my myself, you know, to make sure that there were no bullets in it, and to tell the difference between a bullet and a blank. And like, I knew all this stuff at, you know, 11, 12. And also Luke, before I did anything, he would do it first. He would do the exact action before me. I think the goodbye scene was probably some sort of grouping together of my feelings towards like my father and Luke and Jean, and, you know, that sort of all mushed together. You know, I don't want to lose you, those lines too are so, like, for a little kid, that like very like melodramatic and like sentimental, and just, you know, immediately make you feel like, I don't want to lose you. You know, it's such a scary thought for a kid to lose your protector, and it's not a hard place to put yourself in. Emotionally, and we shot it towards the end of the film, so I had really gotten, you know, a working feeling of the story.
When the shoot was over, Natalie returned to her school in Long Island, New York, until the movie premiered in Paris.
I remember the Paris premiere of the film, which was so exciting. Luke and his girlfriend took me and got me like a suit, like a little, like, I like these sort of boy suits to wear to the premiere, and you know, I got all dressed up, and I had my family, and Jean was there, and Luke was like in the first reunion with them, and it was so exciting. It was so exciting to see it with an audience. And then we went, the opening night, we went to movie theaters where people were going to like midnight shows, and we would show up after the movie on stage. So the crowds were just going wild, and huge theaters, like really, you know, 1,000-seat theaters, and it was so cool. It was such an exciting thing. I haven't had any comparable experience since.
Looking back, Natalie credits the professional with having launched her career in a very unique way.
So it was such a gift to have that, because that was like the beginning of my acting school, which, you know, I was lucky enough to continue, you know, through my teens and now into my 20s. And it's just been this sort of like prolonged learning experience that was started off with, you know, the ultimate experience. And it was also great because it started me out, you know, when you start out as a kid, a lot of people end up in kid movies. And by starting out as an adult in a film for grown-ups, I think it eased my transition into adult acting more, because people have been looking at me as like a woman sort of since I was a little girl. But it's sort of allowed me to have sort of one stream that there wasn't really like a bump going into adult film roles.
And looking ahead, will Natalie Portman play Matilda again?
I would do anything that Luke directed. If he directed that or anything else he would ever want me to do, I'm there. I'll, you know, sweep the floors for him.